The morning Marcus Vell woke to the sound of a child crying on his porch. He had been retired for exactly 4 years, 2 months, and 11 days. He knew the count not because he was sentimental about it, but because he had been tracking it the way a man tracks the distance between himself and something he nearly didn't survive. Every day without deployment was a day the body healed another millimeter. Every morning without a mission briefing was a morning the mind could be something other than a weapon. He lived at the edge of the Kepler settlement, where the terraformed plains of Kepler 442b stretched out flat and amber under a sun that ran slightly cooler than Earth's, but close enough that you didn't think about it much. The settlement was 18,000 people, farmers mostly. Engineers, families who'd come out here on colony ships for the promise of open land and a slower pace. Marcus had come for the same reason, though he didn't farm and he wasn't an engineer. He fixed things. Machines mostly. People brought him their broken harvesters and their misfiring irrigation rigs and their aging atmospheric processors, and he fixed them without talking much, charged a fair rate, and went home to a house that sat on 2 acres of nothing in particular. The crying was high and strange, not a human child's cry. The pitch shifted in a way that human vocal cords couldn't quite manage, a harmonic flutter underneath the sob, like 2 frequencies running slightly out of sync. Marcus was on his feet before he was fully awake, old habit. 22 years in the United Earth Defense Forces did that to a man. His body responded to stimuli before his brain caught up with the analysis. He crossed to the door in 3 strides, opened it. The child sitting on his porch steps was small, maybe 4 years old by human development equivalency, though he knew alien species aged differently. Her skin was a pale, luminous blue-gray, the color of pre-dawn sky, with faint bioluminescent lines running from her temples down her neck like the ghost of circuitry. Her eyes, when she looked up at him, were enormous and silver, with slit pupils that were currently wide open in distress. She had 4 fingers on each hand. 2 small, vestigial antenna-like structures rose from her forehead, flat against her skull in what he suspected was a fear response. Her ears were pointed and tracking, rotating slightly toward every sound. She was soaked from the night rain, shivering, clutching something to her chest, a small cloth bundle, the kind you pack in a hurry. She stared up at him with those silver eyes and said, in remarkably clear standard, "They captured my mother." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back from the doorway. "Come inside," he said. "You're freezing." She wouldn't eat at first. He set out what he had, some reconstituted grain porridge, a cup of warm broth he'd had sitting in the thermos from the night before, and she sat at his kitchen table with her bundle in her lap and watched him with those wide silver eyes and didn't touch anything. "My name is Marcus," he said. He sat down across from her, leaving the table between them. He knew better than to crowd a frightened creature, any frightened creature. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Selly," she said finally. "Selly," he nodded. "How old are you, Selly?" She held up 6 fingers, then looked at her hands, then held up one more. "7," she said. "In your counting. Mama taught me your counting." "Your mother taught you standard." "Mama teaches everything." Her voice wobbled on the last word. Her antenna structures pressed flat again. "They took her 3 days ago. She told me to run, and I ran, and I kept running until I saw your light." 3 days. He thought about a 7-year-old child, alone, in the plains of Kepler 442b for 3 days and nights. The temperature dropped to near freezing after dark. There were rockjaw lizards out there, territorial and unpleasant, and at least 2 species of insect that could raise welts that would send a grown man to the medical bay. She was sitting in front of him with no welts, no visible injuries, and she had found his house. "You're very capable," he said. He meant it. Something flickered across her face. Not pride exactly, something more complicated. "Mama says I have to be," she said quietly. He looked at her for another moment. Then he stood, went to the cabinet, and came back with a small jar of dried berries, sweetroot, a Kepler native species that most settlers had learned to eat. He set it on the table without comment and went to refill the broth. When he came back, the jar was open and she was eating steadily, still watching him. "Tell me about the people who took your mother," he said. Her name was Sally von Mira. Her mother's name was Thessaly von Mira, and they had come to Kepler 442b 6 months ago aboard a resettlement vessel, one of the small private transports that moved refugees and relocates between the outer colony worlds. Thessaly was Myrth, one of the species Marcus had encountered twice during his service, a people from a system 3 light-years spinward who had been largely displaced from their home world by an expansionist faction called the Vorath Compact. The Myrth were recognizable by the bioluminescent patterns, the silver eyes, the antenna structures. They were quiet people, scholars, traders, healers. They had scattered across a dozen systems over the past 30 years, making lives where they could. Thessaly had brought Sally to Kepler 442b because someone had told her it was safe. Small settlement, no compact presence, good people. Someone had been wrong, or the situation had changed. 3 nights ago, Sally said, they came to our house, 4 of them. They had uniforms. Gray uniforms with a mark here. She touched her left shoulder. Mama told me the mark. She said if I ever saw it, I should run. What's the mark? Sally traced a shape in the air, 2 angular lines crossing with a small circle at the intersection. Marcus felt something move in his chest. He had seen that mark before. Not in years, but you didn't forget it. Compact Enforcement Unit. Black Charter Operation. They operated in legal gray zones in the outer colonies, technically unauthorized by UEE jurisdiction, functionally unchecked by anyone. They took her, Sally said. She was still talking to them when I went out the back. She told me with her hands. She demonstrated a quick gesture, a flick, and fold that he guessed was a Myrth signal to run. So I ran. You did exactly right, he said. I know, she said it without arrogance, just as a stated fact. Mama was buying me time, that's why she kept talking. He was quiet for a moment. Why did they want her? He asked. Sally's expression shifted into something careful, a look too old for 7. Mama is a historian, she said. She knows things about the old compact territories, records, where things were, where things are. She paused. She says information is the most dangerous thing to carry. A Myrth historian with knowledge of compact territorial records. He could think of several reasons a Black Charter Enforcement Unit might want her, and none of them were pleasant. Sally, he said carefully, do you know where they took her? The freight depot, she said. On the east edge of the settlement. I followed them until it wasn't safe to follow anymore. They went into the big hangar, the one with the locked fence. He knew the depot. He'd done repairs for the manager twice. Loading dock, 2 large hangars, a small administrative building, and a landing pad that could handle mid-sized transports. Far enough from the main settlement that noise wasn't an issue. Private enough that 4 men in gray uniforms could do their work without interference. He looked at this 7-year-old child sitting at his table eating dried sweetroot berries, and he thought about what she was asking him. She wasn't asking him anything technically. She had told him what happened. She had trusted him with the information. She was sitting here because she'd run for 3 days, and she'd seen his light. But he was not a man who could hear. They captured my mother and do nothing. He stood up. Finish eating, he said, and sleep if you can. I'm going to make some calls. Part 2. The armor he tried to leave behind. Marcus's barn was not just a barn. The house was simple, 4 rooms, modest, the belongings of a man who had learned not to accumulate. But the barn held his tools, his repair equipment, his parts inventory, and in the back corner under a tarpaulin that had 4 years of honest dust on it. a storage locker that he had not opened since the day he arrived. He stood in front of it now in the gray morning light, the rain having stopped, the amber plains visible through the barn's small window. The locker was biometric. It opened at his palm. He stood looking at what was inside. His armor was not the standard-issue UEDF exosuit. He had earned the right to carry specialized equipment after 15 years and a set of actions in the Cauldron system that he did not discuss at social gatherings. The suit was compact modular, designed for a single operator working without support, reactive polymer plating over a flexible mesh underlayer, helmet with integrated optics and communications, power source good for 72 hours of active use. Beside it, his sidearm, a pulse pistol, his long rifle broken down into its components and cased. A tactical blade. He stood looking at these things for a long time. Then he started to take them out. He moved methodically, the way he'd moved through thousands of equipment checks across 22 years. Check the power cell, check the seals, run the diagnostic cycle. His hands remembered everything. The body remembered what the mind tried to let go of. He had told himself when he came here that he was done with this, that the armor would stay in the locker until he was old enough that it didn't fit anymore, and then he would quietly dispose of it, that the man who had carried all of this would stay in the locker too, in some sense, that Marcus Vell the mechanic was a sufficient and adequate version of himself. He had believed it mostly. He was still Marcus Vell the mechanic. That had not changed. But there was a child sleeping on his couch who had run for 3 days because her mother told her to run, and her mother was in a freight hangar at the edge of the settlement, and the people who had her wore compact enforcement markings. He was not a man who could make the other choice. He suited up slowly, running each connection check twice, the way his first sergeant had beaten into him so many years ago that it had become structural. Check twice. Trust the redundancy. Assume nothing until you've verified it yourself. When he was done, he stood in the barn in the dim light, and he was not quite the same shape he had been before. He carried the suit's helmet under one arm and went back to the house. Sally was not asleep. She was sitting on the couch with her cloth bundle, and she watched him come through the door, and she looked at the suit, and she was very quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're a soldier." "Retired," he said. "Like Mama says, retired means you stopped but you could start again." "Something like that." She looked at him with those enormous silver eyes, and the antenna structures on her forehead rose slightly, a different position than the fear flat he'd seen before. He didn't know enough Meyerth body language to read it precisely, but it seemed like something that wasn't fear. "Are you going to get her?" she asked. "I'm going to look at the situation," he said carefully, "and then I'm going to make a decision." "What would make you decide not to?" He thought about that. "If there were too many of them and no good approach and no way to get your mother out safely, I'd have to contact the settlement authority and request external support instead. That would take longer. I want to be honest with you about that." She considered this with the gravity of a creature who had been processing adult information for 3 days on her own. "Mama says honest people are rare," she said. "She says when you find one, pay attention." "Your mama sounds smart." "She's the smartest person I know." The wobble was back in her voice, but she held it together. "Please bring her back." He put his hand on the doorframe and looked at her. "Stay in the house," he said. "Don't open the door for anyone but me or your mother. There's food in the cabinet. If I'm not back in 4 hours, go to the Settlement Authority building. It's 2 kilometers south. There's a blue flag outside, and tell them everything you told me. Use my name. Tell them Marcus Vell sent you." She nodded. "Do you understand?" "Yes." She straightened on the couch, squared her small shoulders. "I'll wait." He believed her. She was that kind of person already at 7. He put on the helmet and walked out into the gray morning. Part 3, The Freight Depot. He went in quiet. That was always his preference when preference was available. Loud was for when you'd already been seen and the math had changed. Quiet was for the approach, for the assessment, for the window of time before a situation locked into violence or didn't. The freight depot sat 2 kilometers from the main settlement, connected by a gravel track that serviced the loading operations. Marcus came across the plains instead, on foot, using the shallow drainage ridges as cover. The amber grass was knee-high in places. Good cover if you knew how to use it. He reached the perimeter fence, chain link, 2 meters, with a security scanner on the gate that was running commercial hardware, and he crouched in the grass and looked. 2 visible guards, gray uniforms, positioned at the hangar's main entrance. Both armed, he clocked the sidearms at their hips, pulse weapons similar to his, and one of them had a long arm slung across his back. The administrative building had lights on. A third person, maybe more, visible through the window as moving shadows. The landing pad held a mid-sized transport, the kind designed for cargo transfer. It was powered down, but the ramp was extended, and there were crates staged near the base of it. They're loading, he thought. They're getting ready to move. Which meant Thessaly von Mira was either on that ship or she would be soon. And once she was on a compact transport in open space, Marcus's options reduced to nothing. He ran his suit's optic overlay at maximum magnification and scanned the hangar's side wall. Loading vents, utility access, a personnel door on the far side. He shifted his attention to the roof, 2 ventilation units, a comm relay, a skylight cluster near the rear. He thought about it. 22 years had given him a catalog of approaches, and he sorted through them now with the same methodical habit as the equipment check. Direct breach, loud, fast, high casualty risk to the asset. Utility access, quieter, longer, risk of interior encounter without good intel. Roof, time-consuming, but the skylight gave him a look inside before he committed. He chose the utility access as primary, with the roof as the fallback if the access door was alarmed or locked above his capability to handle quietly. He circled the perimeter fence line, moving slowly, staying in the grass. He found the utility door in the fence's back corner, accessed via keypad. He ran his suit's signal scanner, a capability that had felt like overkill when he purchased the specialized equipment package, and that he'd been grateful for on 3 separate occasions since, and read the pad's frequency. 30 seconds of quiet work. The gate clicked open. The utility corridor ran along the inside of the hangar's rear wall. Storage, maintenance access, power routing, dim lighting. He moved through it heel to toe, minimizing sound, helmet's optics running in low-light enhancement. He could hear voices ahead. He found an access panel that gave him a view through a narrow gap into the main hangar bay. He pressed himself flat and looked. 4 men. 3 he could see clearly, 1 partially visible near the hangar entrance. 2 were working at a portable equipment station, some kind of data retrieval setup, screens active, cables running to a device he recognized as a neural interface extraction unit. His jaw tightened. That was not standard enforcement equipment. That was compact black site hardware, designed for information retrieval from unwilling subjects. The 4th figure was seated in a chair near the center of the space. She was Myrth. He could see the bioluminescent patterns from here, brighter with what he suspected was stress response, pulsing irregularly. Her hands were restrained behind her. She was conscious, upright, watching the men at the equipment station with the expression of someone who has decided not to show them anything. Thessaly von Mira. She was around 35 by human visual estimation, though Myrth aged at a different rate. Her features were angular and precise, her antenna structures held absolutely motionless. A control that took effort, he suspected, a studied blankness imposed over whatever was actually moving underneath. Her silver eyes tracked every movement in the room with constant, quiet attention. Even restrained, even in a freight hangar on a colony world, she was cataloging, recording, being as much as possible a historian. He counted the men again, confirmed 4, assessed positions, assessed angles. The 2 at the equipment station were distracted. The one near the entrance was facing outward. The 4th was moving between the transport ramp and the crates, loading something. The nearest man to Thessaly was the equipment station operator on the left, maybe 6 meters from her chair, back partially turned. Marcus studied the situation for another 60 seconds. Then he made his decisions, and he moved. He took the equipment station operator first, from behind, non-lethal. The suit's low-frequency emitter was built for exactly this. The man dropped silently. Before the second operator had fully turned to look, Marcus had crossed the distance and taken him the same way. 2 seconds of silence. Then what? The loading man's voice, sharp with sudden alarm. Marcus was already moving. The man reached for his sidearm. Marcus's hand was faster. He caught the arm, controlled the draw, used the man's own momentum to sit him hard against the side of a crate. Another press of the emitter. A third man down. The guard from the entrance came through the hangar door at a run, weapon already raised. Marcus had used the crates as cover, and the guard's sight line was wrong. He was looking at his 3 colleagues on the ground, and the fraction of a second confusion was enough. Marcus stepped around the crate. The guard swung the weapon. Marcus deflected it upward, stepped inside his reach, and the guard joined the others on the hangar floor. 12 seconds from first contact to last. He stood in the sudden quiet. From the chair, Thessaly von Mira was watching him with those steady silver eyes. She had not made a sound during any of it. Her bioluminescent patterns were pulsing more rapidly now, stress or surprise or both, but her face was composed. "I have zip restraints in the suit pocket," he said, pulling off his helmet so she could see his face. "Let me get them bound before any of them wake up, then I'll get you loose." "Yes," she said. Her standard was precise, slightly accented. "That's the logical order." A pause. "Who are you?" "Marcus Vell. I'm a mechanic. I live about 4 kilometers west." "A mechanic," she said. "I retired," he said, already moving, securing the first man's hands. "About 4 years ago." "From this," she said, indicating with a slight movement of her head his armor. "Yes." "Why did you come here?" He finished the third restraint, stood, looked at her. "Your daughter is at my house," he said. Thessaly von Mira's composure cracked for exactly 3 seconds. The bioluminescent lines along her face and neck flared white bright, brilliant and involuntary, and her antenna structures shot upright, fully extended, trembling. Her eyes went wide and silver and wet. Then she pulled it back, sealed herself again, but the tremble didn't entirely leave. "She's safe." Her voice was very controlled. "She's safe. She's been waiting for you for 3 days." He crouched behind her chair and worked the restraint on her wrists. It was a standard compact security binder. He'd seen them before. He had the tool. "She's been eating dried sweetroot berries and sitting on my couch refusing to sleep." Something moved across Thessaly's face that was not quite a smile but occupied the same territory. "That sounds like her." "She's very capable," he said. "You've done a good job." The restraint released. She brought her hands forward, rubbed her wrists, and stood, and she was taller than he'd expected, near his own height, and the bioluminescent patterns across her skin were settling into something lower, steadier, a deep blue-white that was nothing like the stress pulse of minutes ago. She looked at the men on the floor, then at the equipment station. She crossed to it, and with precise and deliberate calm, she took the neural extraction unit off the table and dropped it onto the concrete floor and put her heel through the interface housing. "That felt necessary," she said. "It was," he agreed. == Part 4. The walk home. He called the settlement authority while they were still in the hangar. He had a contact there, Greta Munn, the security coordinator, a former UEE administrator who'd come to Kepler for the same reasons he had. She answered on the third chime, and when he explained what he had, there was a 2-second silence, and then she said, in the flat tone of a woman doing rapid mental calculation, 4 compact enforcement. Secured. 4 secured. The transport needs to be impounded before it lifts. We'll have a team there in 12 minutes. Appreciated. He and Thessaly walked out of the hangar while they waited. The morning had shifted. The sun was higher now, the amber light spreading across the plains, and the air smelled like damp grass and mineral soil. He stood near the fence and she stood a few feet away, and they were both quiet for a moment. 4 years ago, she said, she wasn't looking at him, she was looking at the horizon. What made you stop? He considered the question. I'd been in long enough, he said. I'd seen enough, done enough. I came out here to be something else for a while. And yet, he looked down at the helmet he was carrying. There's a difference between being done with something and being a different person. She turned to look at him then. In the morning light, the bioluminescent patterns on her face were faint, barely visible, just the ghost of light beneath the surface. Her eyes were very clear and very silver and very direct. I want to thank you, she said. I will want to thank you more properly when I've seen my daughter, because right now I don't have the full capacity for gratitude. There's a deficit where it should be, because most of my current function is being allocated to not simply running in the direction of my child. It was the most precise description of parental restraint he had ever heard. We can walk faster, he said. Yes, she said. Let's. They didn't run exactly, but they moved at a pace that was faster than comfortable, and neither of them commented on it. She followed you to the depot, he said after a few minutes. I assumed she would follow for a while, Thessaly said. I hoped the instinct to comply with my signal would override the instinct to stay close. It apparently did. She said you were buying time when you kept talking. Thessaly was quiet for a moment. She shouldn't have to know things like that, she said. No, he agreed, but she does know them, and she used the knowledge correctly. You made her capable. I made her capable because the world we've been living in required it. There was an edge under the precision of her voice now, not toward him, but toward something broader. I would have preferred she simply be 7. He thought about that. He understood it in a way that had nothing to do with children, and everything to do with the particular weight of preparing for a danger you'd rather not have to face. How long have you been running from the compact? He asked. He kept his voice level. It wasn't an intrusive question between people who'd just been through a freight hangar together. Selly was 4 when we left our last settlement, she said. Before that, 2 years of movement, 6 years total. She paused. I have records, territorial surveys from before the compact's current territorial claims. If verified, they would undermine several of the legal frameworks the compact uses to justify its expansion. She said this with the same careful precision she seemed to use for everything. They would very much like those records. They would also like to ensure I cannot verify them for anyone else. Where are the records? She touched her temple with 2 fingers, a brief, deliberate gesture. Here, she said, and encoded in formats I haven't shown anyone yet. He looked at her. You'll need to do something with that information eventually, he said, if it matters as much as they seem to think it does. I know, she said. I've known for years. I've been working toward a circumstance where doing so wouldn't get Selly killed. She glanced at him. The circumstances have not been cooperative. They might be now, he said. Greta Munn, the settlement authority contact I called, she has UEE connections. 4 compact enforcement and unauthorized black charter operation on a colony world is the kind of thing that triggers oversight attention. If you have testimony and documentation, the timing might be right. She was quiet for a moment, and he could see her running the calculation. The same way Selly had calculated whether to eat the porridge, the same careful weighing that had clearly been their shared habit for 6 years. "Perhaps," she said, "I'll need time to assess." "You have time," he said. "They're not going anywhere." The house was visible ahead, small and plain against the amber plain. Thessaly stopped walking about 50 meters out. He noticed her stop and he stopped too, and he looked at her. She was very still. The bioluminescent patterns along her face and neck were running in slow, deep pulses, something rhythmic and involuntary. Her hands, which had been steady throughout the hangar and the walk, were pressed together now. "Give me a moment," she said, very quiet. He stepped back. He was not a man who interfered with other people's preparation for important things. After a moment, she breathed out slowly. "All right," she said. They walked to the door. He opened it. From the couch, in the dim interior, a 7-year-old girl looked up with enormous silver eyes, and then she was off the couch and across the floor in a running blur, and Thessaly came through the door and met her in the middle, and Marcus stepped back and let the door frame take some of his weight. He did not look away. It seemed wrong to look away, as if the moment needed a witness. Sally had her arms around her mother's neck. Thessaly was on her knees on the floor with her arms around her daughter, and her face pressed into Sally's small shoulder, and the bioluminescent patterns across both of them were running bright, a deep warm gold that he hadn't seen before, a color that seemed to mean something different than the other colors he'd observed. Something that was not about stress or fear or surprise. Sally was not crying. She had said she would wait, and she had waited, and now she had her mother, and she was holding on with the complete and total conviction of someone who had planned for this moment and intended to make it real. He heard her say, very quietly into her mother's neck, "I ran like you told me." "I know," Thessaly said. Her voice had lost all its precision. It was just a voice now, low and shaking. "I know you did. And I found him." A small pause. "He fixes things." A sound that might have been a laugh and might have been something else entirely. "He does," Thessaly said. "He does. ====. Part 5 after. The settlement authority team arrived within the hour. Greta Munn came herself, a practical, square-shouldered woman in her 50s, who had the manner of someone who had seen a great deal and stopped being surprised by most of it. She took in the 4 secured compact enforcement officers, the impounded transport, and the Meyerth historian with the incriminating territorial records without visible alarm, and proceeded to handle all of it with the systematic efficiency that Marcus had learned to respect about her. "This is going to be a significant filing," she told him, while 2 of her deputies loaded the enforcement officers into a transport of their own. "Yes," he said. "There will be UE attention, external parties." "Thessaly knows," he said. "She's prepared for that." Greta looked at him for a moment, at the armor he was still wearing, the helmet under his arm. "You've been quiet for 4 years," she said, not accusatory, observational. 4 years and 2 months and 11 days, he said, "give or take." She nodded once. "You want to be left alone for most of the follow-up." "Please." "Managed." She made a note on her tablet. "I'll keep your direct involvement minimal. You'll need to give a statement, but that can be done remotely." "Appreciated." She moved off toward her team, and Marcus stood in the morning sun outside the freight depot and thought about what came next. What came next, in the immediate sense, was Sally sitting at his kitchen table again, while Thessaly gave her statement to a settlement authority deputy, and Sally watching Marcus with her silver eyes as he cleaned and recased the components of his long rifle. "Can I ask something?" she said. "Yes." "Do you have to go back to being just a mechanic now?" He looked up from the rifle case. "I never stopped being a mechanic," he said. "That's not a diminished thing." She thought about that. "Mama says the best people are more than one thing," she said. "Like, a thing and also something else at the same time. She says that's called depth." Your mama is right about most things, he said. Yes, Sally looked out the window at the amber plain. The morning sun was full now, warm and level. Will we have to leave? He set down the rifle case. That depends on what the UEE decides to do about the compact's activity here, he said, and on what your mother wants. Those are her decisions to make. I want to stay, Sally said, plainly, without drama, just a statement of preference. It's nice here, and the berries are good. He found, unexpectedly, that this made him want to smile. The berries are good, he agreed. Thessaly came and found him in the barn an hour later. He was stowing the armor. She stood in the doorway and watched him for a moment, and he was aware of being watched and did not turn around. She's asleep, Thessaly said, finally. Good. He folded the last section of plating and set it in the locker. She needed it. Yes, a pause. She told me she felt safe here. He straightened, turned around. Thessaly was leaning in the doorway with her arms crossed, not in a closed way but in the way of a person who needed to occupy their hands with something. In the barn's morning light, the bioluminescent patterns on her face were faint and low. The deep, warm gold he'd seen when she and Sally were together faded now to something quieter, a pale, constant glow. She's earned the right to feel safe, he said. She has. Thessaly looked at him steadily. So has her mother at this point, I would argue. I would agree with that. Silence for a moment, the kind that was not uncomfortable, just present. I should tell you, she said, that I don't trust easily. It's a product of 6 years as much as it's a product of temperament. I want to be honest with you about that. Honesty is rare, he said. I've been told you appreciate it. Something crossed her face, startled, then amused. She told you that. She said her mother taught her. Thessaly unfolded her arms and looked down at her hands for a moment. The bioluminescent lines along her wrists and fingers were still carrying that faint gold light, running in slow, steady pulses. She seemed to become aware of it and looked back up at him, and there was something in her expression that was open in a way her face hadn't been in the hangar or on the walk home. You let her eat your berries, she said, and you put on your armor for a child who showed up on your porch. She paused. Why? He thought about it, the way he thought about things, not quickly but genuinely. Because she asked, he said finally. Because she'd run for 3 days and she sat down on my steps and she told me what happened and she trusted me with it. And you can't, he stopped, started again. You can't be trusted with something like that and then set it down. Thessaly looked at him for a long moment. Her antenna structures, which had been fully flat since they'd gotten back to the house, rose slightly, not to the upright position of the previous alert, but an intermediate angle he hadn't seen before. Sally says you fix things, she said. I do. Machines. Mostly. Mostly, she repeated, and then quietly, thank you, Marcus. He nodded. It didn't seem like a moment that needed more than that. She pushed off the doorframe and turned to go back to the house, and then she paused and looked back over her shoulder. Greta Munn tells me the UEE oversight process will likely take several months, she said, during which it would be advisable for Sally and me to remain in place and accessible. That seems reasonable, he said. She suggested we could find temporary accommodation in the settlement. Greta has a contact at the housing registry. She does, he said, or he stopped. Thessaly waited. I have a second room, he said. It's a spare parts room at the moment, but there's a window. It's a short-term solution, if that's useful. She looked at him. Something moved through her expression, not the calculated weighing of the plane's walk, but something lighter than that. It might be useful, she said. All right. She left, and he stood in the barn with the armor locker, and the morning light came through the small window and lay across the floor in a long amber stripe. And Marcus Vell thought about what a long distance 4 years and 2 months and 11 days actually was, and how strange it was that a 7-year-old child on a porch step could make it feel, somehow, not quite so far. He left the locker unlatched. Not open, not displayed, just unlatched in the way of a thing that might need to be accessed again without too much delay. Then he pulled the tarpaulin back over it neatly, and went inside to make breakfast for whoever was awake. Epilogue 6 months later. The UEE oversight team came and went. Thessaly's records, the territorial surveys, the documentation she had been carrying in her memory and in encrypted formats through 6 years of movement, were formally entered into the jurisdictional record. Marcus gave his statement remotely, as arranged. Greta Munn handled the rest with the systematic efficiency that Marcus had always admired. The Compact's Black Charter authority in the Kepler sector was suspended pending formal review. It was not a permanent victory. Thessaly was careful to say so, and Marcus did not argue with her, but it was a real one, and real victories had weight even when they were partial. The spare parts room became Selly's room. She had opinions about it, very specific opinions, rendered with the gravity of someone who had spent 6 years without a room of her own and intended to be deliberate about this one. There were drawings on the wall, secured with the adhesive tack Marcus bought from the settlement supply store. There was a small shelf for her cloth bundle and the things she was beginning to accumulate: a smooth stone from the plains, a dried sweetroot stem, a tool Marcus had shown her how to use for simple repairs because she had asked how things worked and he had told her. She came to the barn sometimes in the afternoons, and he taught her. Thessaly spent her mornings working, rebuilding her documentation, cross-referencing her memory records with whatever archival access the UEE provided, corresponding with other Myrth historians who were cautiously, carefully beginning to organize. She was precise and methodical about all of it. She worked the way she seemed to do most things, with complete attention and without waste. In the evenings they sat on the porch, sometimes all 3 of them, sometimes, when Selly had fallen asleep at a reasonable hour, just the 2 of them. Thessaly had been right that she didn't trust easily. The trust arrived the way the amber plains changed through the seasons, slowly, in ways that were only visible when you looked at a long enough horizon. But it arrived. Marcus, who did not hurry things, did not try to rush it. One evening in early autumn, the Kepler sun running low and orange over the plain, Selly asleep inside, Thessaly sat on the porch steps with her hands around a cup of tea, and the bioluminescent patterns on her face, running in the deep, slow gold that Marcus had come to understand, meant something specific, something that belonged to very particular moments. She started calling this home, Thessaly said. Has she? He said. Yes, a pause. I find I don't have a correction to offer her. He looked at the horizon, the amber grass moving in the evening wind. A long way in any direction, and all of it quiet. Neither do I, he said. The gold light on her face pulsed softly in the evening air. They sat there while the sun went down. And word count, ~9, 700 words duration, ~60-61 minutes at 160 WPM. Engine, E-shield protector, energy family, 3 quiet protection. Appearance tier, moderate stream, wholesome. Film DNA source, The Gamma Ray Man 2013, extracted only, not named in story.